I've never had so many books for one wrap-up, but probably because I'm cheating and this is 2 months. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for being here. Today I'm going to be doing a recap of the 15 books that I read between June and July. I think I filmed a June wrap-up, but then something happened to it and I obviously never posted it, but I still wanted to talk about the books I read, so I'm just going to do both today, and I'm going to try and rapid fire through these, but we'll see how that goes because I love to talk. I was trying to use natural lighting, but like always that didn't work. So maybe I look crazy now, but we'll see. The first two I read are for a video that is still not out yet. My roommate Kat and I picked out 2 books for each other, one that was in the person's comfort zone and then one that's out. Somehow I have lost some of the footage and I don't know what's going on. So hopefully that video actually makes it out one day, but right now it's lost in space. So I'm not gonna go super in depth into these 2 books, but I will talk about them. For the book that was outside of my comfort zone, Kat picked out The Last Year of the War by Susan Meisner. This is a historical fiction, which this is my first historical fiction, and I've always been kind of scared of them and thought they were boring, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars, and I haven't read any other historical fiction since this one, but now I feel like I'm more inclined to pick one up. I'm not like scared or bored by them. This is about a young girl who is German American during World War II. Her family ends up getting sent to an internment camp, and it's about her experience there. And while she's at the internment camp, she becomes friends with this girl Mariko, who is Japanese, and they are like an unlikely friendship. And then obviously they aren't in the internment camps forever, so they get separated, and now the main character, Elise, is an old lady and she is looking to find Mariko and reconnect with her. As I'm sure most historical fictions are, this wasn't a very exciting book or anything like that, but I did really enjoy it. I found it interesting and I liked that I felt like I was learning stuff while I was reading it. I think the lighting is doing something very strange. I hope not. Then I read the other book that Kat picked out for me, which is a thriller. It's What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall, and I've been seeing this a lot lately. Back when she picked this out for me, I had never heard of it and neither had she, but it sounded like an interesting idea, so she picked it up. And I enjoyed this. This felt like a unique concept to me, which is what I really liked. I could not put this down. Like, I wasn't super invested, I wasn't loving it, but I was hooked and all I wanted to do was get to the end. This is about 3 girls who were like 11, 12, and they were hanging out in the woods this one summer, and one day one of them ends up getting like brutally attacked. I think she was stabbed 15, 16 times and she somehow survived, and the 3 girls identified the killer and put him away. But now it's about 20 years later, the 3 girls are not really friends anymore, but they've all been keeping this big secret from that summer of the attack, and one of them is ready to expose that secret. I really had fun with this. I ended up giving it a 3.5 as well. You'll see, I think in June I had a lot of 3.5s. It was just like the number of the month. I just really wanted to get to the end and see what happened. And again, I just liked that it was unique. I feel like all of the thrillers are starting to mesh together and feel the same to me, but this one was different. Then I read my first ever Elin Hilderbrand book, which was Winter in Paradise. This is the first one in a trilogy. It might be her only series, I'm not really sure, but this is about a woman whose husband dies in like a plane or helicopter crash, and he's in St. John, and she's like, well, that's interesting. I didn't know he was in St. John. And then her and her sons go there for the funeral and stuff, or to get his body or something, and they realize he has been leading this whole secret double life in St. John. There's some drama, obviously, there's a little bit of romance, but I would just call this a general fiction, and I had a lot of fun with this. It's short, it's not really like a mystery, but it still was like, ooh, like I want to know what happened. I'm enjoying the drama, so it was fun. It wasn't anything spectacular. This was another 3.5 stars for me, but it was good, and I definitely want to read the next one. I think that it's on my TBR for August. Yes, it is. After that, I started a new video where I reread my middle school favorites, and that video is actually out already, so I'm not going to go into detail about these either, but you can go watch that video if you want to see like my full thoughts on everything. The first book that I read for that was Divergent by Veronica Roth, and if you don't know what this book is, then like where were you in 2012? Obviously, like I said, this was a reread for me, but it was really fun because I don't remember a lot of what happened in this book or the movie, so even though I knew the main plot points, this was still fun and I enjoyed it. The one thing about this is I was super let down by the ending. The ending was just so boring. I was expecting a big like like plot twist or cliffhanger to make me want to pick up the next book, but there was nothing. Because of that, I ended up giving this one just 3 stars. I think I might have been a little bit harsh. Maybe it's really worth like a 3.5. I don't know, but I'm gonna leave it at a 3. It was enjoyable, but that ending really was like meh. And the writing and everything isn't spectacular, so it was just a fun, enjoyable book. Like an average, but good average book, you know? The rest of the books for that video I read in July, so I'll get to those in a moment, but I'll finish up June first. I went on a beach vacation and I ended up reading 3 books while I was there. The first one was The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, and this was really fun. I had high hopes for this because I have several people that I know in real life who love this book and have recommended it to me, and this did not disappoint. This is about this woman, Amber, who is obsessed with this couple. It looks like they have the perfect life. They have like 2 beautiful kids. They're beautiful. They're super rich. They have a giant house. They're just everything that she thinks is success and perfection. So she's obsessed with them and really tries to insert herself into their lives. The first half of this was good, but then something happens and then the second half was just really good. Like it was so juicy. I was reading this next to my mom and she had already read it and recommended it to me. And I would just turn to her so many times and I was like, oh my gosh, this happened. They said this, blah, 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 blah. I was like, I cannot believe it. She was like, yep, just keep reading. I thought the big plot twist was a bit predictable and I haven't read any of them, but there's a couple other books that are really popular right now that I think are super similar to this. I've had people spoil them for me and I was like, oh, well, I read this one, so I'm not gonna read the other one. So this is kind of what I was talking about with the other thriller, that I feel like so many are just like blending together and they all sound similar, but I think this one came out first. Not sure about that. Anyways, this was really fun. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think that honestly, my mom ruined the reading experience for me a little bit on accident. I told her exactly like where I was in the book and everything, and the big plot twist had already happened, but then she kept telling me like, oh, just wait, you're gonna have your mind blown. So I was expecting another giant plot twist or something crazy to happen, and it never did. So she kind of accidentally gave me like false hope that there would be more at the end of this book than there really was. If that didn't happen, then maybe I would have given it a little bit of a higher rating. But still, 4 stars, totally loved this. I would recommend, and I'm glad I finally picked this up after like a year of being told to read it. Then I read We'll Always Have Summer by Jenny Han. This is the second book in the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series. And these are just like tiny little teeny bopper cutesy books. I brought this on vacation with me because I wanted to have something I could finish like in 1 or 2 days sitting at the pool, and that's exactly what this did for me. This is a 3-star book for me, and I think the first one is too. There's nothing wrong with these other than, I mean, they're like pretty cheesy, but they're just very young, very cutesy, like I said, teeny bopper kind of books. And if that's what I'm looking for, then great, it's fun. But they're not anything special, in my opinion. This one was a little bit more boring to me than the first one, but it was still good, and I'll eventually read the third one. The last book I read in June was Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney, and I read it on my Kindle, which I was very excited to use my Kindle. Before this, the only book I had read by her was Rock, Paper, Scissors, which I really loved, just like everybody else. And so I had high hopes for this one, and this was a disappointment. This one was about a woman who is in a coma and she can actually hear people, but she can't see or move or talk. Obviously, she's in a coma and she doesn't really remember what happened to her leading up to going into the coma. Like, she doesn't know what happened, but she has a feeling that someone did something to her, that it wasn't an accident. You're just going through her figuring out what happened and then also like hearing what's going on while she's in the hospital bed. This was just really boring to me because a lot of it was just her like in the hospital bed, not moving, and I don't know, it felt really slow, which I wasn't expecting. Like, I go into a thriller wanting it to be really fast paced, and I feel like Rock, Paper, Scissors was. And then when the plot twists and things did happen, I just didn't really love them. Like, I felt kind of stupid actually. I felt like, I'm sorry, you're contradicting yourself. I feel like there's no way that that's true because of what you said. And I tried to like go back and I was like, oh, I don't care enough. But I was like, these plot twists aren't making sense to me, and then they're not even that exciting anyways, so I didn't love it, and I really thought I was going to enjoy it, so it was a letdown. I ended up giving it 2 stars, which I do not normally do. I still want to try more of her books. I think that Sometimes I Lie is her lowest rated anyways, That's not true. I have one that I think is a lot lower. It's like the lowest rated book on my TBR, but whatever. But I have His and Hers on my TBR for August, and that one I've heard good things about. So I'm hoping this was just like a one-off. We'll see. Moving on to July, I read 8 books, and I started with my favorite, I think, which was When in Rome by Sarah Adams. This book is everywhere, so I'm sure that you've seen it or heard of it, but this is about this famous artist. In my head, she's Taylor Swift. And she is like kind of burnt out, and so she just escapes. Like, she doesn't tell anyone where she's going, and she drives to Rome, Kentucky because she's a big Audrey Hepburn fan. She's trying to recreate this movie where I think she's in Rome or something, and she's like, oh, the closest Rome to me is Rome, Kentucky. She gets stuck there, and she ends up staying with this guy, what's his name? With Noah. He's a baker, he owns a pie shop in town. It is very much small town. I feel like this was my first real small town romance. Loved it. This is just so cute. I had an amazing time reading this. I was laughing, smiling, and honestly, this is probably the closest I've had to a 5-star book since February. I have not had a 5-star since then, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I don't know why, but honestly, it might be a 5-star. Maybe I'll revisit that. But this was so cute. I just really loved it. There's nothing special about it. Like, it's just a rom-com. It's nothing super deep or emotional or anything. But I just loved it. Like, out of all the rom-coms I've read, it's probably my favorite, and it was just fun. Then I read a book that took me way too long and was pretty painful. And that was Tentacles by Roland Smith. And this looks suspicious, but this was part of my rereading middle school favorites book. So this is actually a kid's book, and I read this so many times when I was in middle school, probably elementary school too. This is about these people who hunt for things called cryptids, which are, I thought they were like mythological creatures and stuff, but in this one they're looking for a giant squid, which those are real, right? I don't know, but there's also dinosaurs in this one, like they're hatching dinosaur eggs and stuff. But this just was painful. And probably my fault because this is a kid's book. Out of everything that I read for this was the hardest to get through. If you want my full thoughts, you can go watch that video. But I think this was honestly just a case of me trying to read something that's not for me. Like, I liked this 10, 15 years ago, and I was trying to get myself to like it now. Oh, I don't think I said, but I gave this 2.5 stars. The reason it's not like a 1 or a 2 is because, again, it's not the book's fault, I don't think. Do I think it's a really great book? No, but it's more my fault. I just didn't vibe with the book at this age of mine. Even though they were the last books I read this month, I'll go ahead and just get through the rest of the ones I read for that video, which was A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I read the first 2 of these, which these are tiny little kids' books. These are like children's books. These are the youngest out of what I read. And if you didn't read these, like, what were you doing as a child? These were amazing. I feel like these are what you give kids when they first start reading chapter books. And this was actually really fun to reread. It was just very nostalgic, very fun. I read each of these within one day. I loved them 15 years ago, and I love them now. I didn't give them a star rating, and I don't know why. I guess maybe just because they're so young and so short that I didn't feel like giving them a star. As a series, in my heart, they're a 5-star series, but I don't have a rating for them. And I finished that video with my favorite, The Hunger Games. I couldn't not read this in that video, and she did not disappoint. This book is kind of what sparked that whole video idea for me. I wanted to reread the whole series and then read the prequel before the movie comes out. So I was really excited to get to this one, and I loved it. I had so much fun reading this. It really sucked me in, and I cannot wait to get to the next one. I'm gonna space it out a little bit. I don't have it on my TBR for August, but we'll see. This is the one I was most excited to get to, and I really had a fun time reading this. There was so much that I didn't remember. Pretty much only remembered the big thing that happens at the end of the game, but other than that, it was a really fun reading experience. I will definitely be continuing the series. I gave this one a 4.5 stars because it was amazing, and it's The Hunger Games. If you have not read this yet, adult, high schooler, whatever you are, you have to read this. If you somehow don't know what this is about, it is a YA dystopian about a world where every year people fight to the death for the entertainment of all these rich people, and it's crazy and it's fun. Moving on, I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and this is my first book by her. I know that she's written fantasy books, which I own and just haven't read yet, but this one is a satire, so it's totally different. and I felt like this would be a good intro to her writing because I'm intimidated by her fantasy books. This is about two authors who are like acquaintances, they're not really friends. One of them ends up dying and the other steals her story. It was like a first draft of a book that nobody knew about, and so she took it and published it as her own. And then she gets into all this trouble. The woman who died, whose story she stole, is Asian and she's white, and she's always kind of had this like weird thing where she's like, oh, you're only successful because you're Asian and you write Asian stories, and like people don't like to hear from a white woman. So she has that kind of mentality, and the story that she stole from her is about, I think, Asian American history, and so everybody is kind of like attacking her for it. And then she starts like taking new author photos that are kind of racially ambiguous, and she changes her name to Song, and like it's very interesting. She's just a very unlikable character who's stealing someone's work and trying to kind of like change her identity and stuff to become what she thinks will make her more successful. And it talks a lot about race, about women in the publishing industry, and a lot of like kind of heavier topics, but then it's very satirical and like kind of funny. So this was interesting. It was definitely different than anything I've ever read before. And the one thing was I hated every single character, and you're supposed to, but like there was seriously not one redeeming character in this book, and I hate reading books like that. It made me think of In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, which is a thriller that I was like super excited for and everybody loves, and I hated every character in it, and I hate that book. I think I gave it like a 1 or 2 star and everybody loves it, and like this was kind of the same for me. And then the end happened and I was just like, I don't know. So this was kind of weird for me because the story was really interesting and engaging, but then I kind of hated reading it at the same time because I hated our main character so much. But then I just wanted someone to like, and that never happened. Obviously, I've not really figured out what my true feelings about this book are, so I haven't given it a rating. If I had to, I'd probably give it like a 3. But I would definitely recommend it to people if you think that you would like reading this and you don't mind a cast of just completely unlikable characters, then I totally recommend. But I just don't like that. It's hard for me to get over that. Next, I read Never Lie by Freida McFadden, which is my first book by her, and I loved it. I read it on my Kindle. I love that all of her books are on Kindle Unlimited, and it was so much fun. This one is about a couple who are touring a house, and it's in the middle of a snowstorm, and so the realtor never shows up, and then they end up getting snowed in and staying overnight. And it's the house of this dead psychologist. The wife ends up finding all of these tapes that she took of her patient sessions, and it was just so much fun and kind of twisty. I did not guess the plot twist. I totally thought I had it, and I was like close, but totally wrong. And I love that. I never want to guess the plot twist. So it gave me everything I wanted. I gave it a solid 4 stars, and I'm dying to read more by her. Last book I have to talk about is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams, which comes after When in Rome. This one I feel like gets a lot of hate, or like at least has mixed reviews, and that's because people don't love the main character, or at least the fact that she is like super innocent and she doesn't curse, and it's kind of a big thing in the book, and it really was like cringy for a lot of people, and I thought it totally was going to be, but I love this. This one is about Noah's sister who lives in the small town, and then the like Taylor Swift girl's bodyguard. So he is kind of teaching her how to date. She's like, oh, I'm so bad at dating, blah, 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 I'm so boring, whatever. And he agrees, or is kind of forced into kind of like fake dating, but not really. He's just kind of teaching her how to date. And I thought this was just as cute as the first one. There were a couple of cringy moments where she said like fork or something because she doesn't curse, but I didn't think that it happened very often. It really didn't bother me, and I feel like I'm someone that normally that would bother, so I don't know. In my opinion, it didn't ruin the book, and I still really liked it. It wasn't as good for me as When in Rome, but this was a solid 4 stars. That is everything I read in June and July. I feel like I had 2 pretty good months, and I'm really excited for what August will bring. Let me know what you read this month if you have any recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!